Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV WORLD. In today's show, we'll be taking a look at two very important stories. The first is with the reference to what is going on in India. We've also seen in the past this rise of hatred against Muslims and other minority populations within India, and also a spike in different incidents of violence on the street as well. But now we're also seeing a rise of a different kind of setup and discrimination. And this, of course, is a new wave that we have seen rise in India, which is propagating hate and violence within the community, and it's also causing a lot of trouble for the people, the Muslims in India. This points towards the fact that now perhaps there is a different warfare that is being launched against the Muslim population that needs to be dealt with differently as well. There was, of course, hate speeches in the past, there was mob violence in the past. We've seen political leaders talk about these statements, but perhaps that is not so much needed at the moment when you have an entire generation listening to such music and following the lyrics that are part of such music, and of course other forms of media within India as well, including films. And that, of course, has a different impact on the population within India, especially the younger generation as well. So we're going to take a closer look at these art forms that are now being used to propagate hate within India against Muslims, at what needs to be done about it, and how they continue to justify these art forms by talking about the fact that this is just for spreading awareness, it is not targeting Muslims, and is actually just spreading facts about what needs to be done and how the situation needs to be changed. So that is going to be the focus of our first part of the show today. In our second segment, we'll be taking a closer look at what is going on within Pakistan, especially the political uncertainty that still grips the country, and also the recent statements by the PTI leadership and the former Prime Minister Imran Khan, who talked about the fact that if right decisions are not made, especially by the establishment that he refers to, then Pakistan will be divided into three parts. And he talks about another sort of a conspiracy that exists with reference to Balochistan, with reference to Pakistan being divided, and also points towards how, if this happened, it's going to be the army and other institutions that are going to take the hit, that are going to suffer the most, and the economy, once it breaks down, we're going to be moving towards denuclearization. These are, of course, the statements that have been coming out from the former Prime Minister, in response to which we've seen that Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has also tweeted and talked about how while they're trying to make sure that Pakistan progresses and trying to establish their relationship with different countries around the world and enhance bilateral cooperation, this is what's going on within the country, and that Imran Khan is not fit for assuming office or doing politics, because he talks about the breaking down of Pakistan. Even Zardari also talked about how this is something which should not be spoken about, something about dividing Pakistan or fragmenting Pakistan, and said that as long as they're alive, this is not going to be happening. So we're going to be talking more about the irresponsible statements that have been coming in from the PTI leadership as well, along with, of course, what the future of the political scenario seems to be within Pakistan. For this and more, I've been joined in the studios, as always, by Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal. And for our first segment of the show today, we've been joined by Kapil Dev, who's a human rights activist, and I've also been joined by Dr. John Dayal, who's an Indian human rights activist. Thank you very much for joining us and being a part of the show today. I'll start with you, Dr. John. We've talked about the different ways in which we've seen discrimination exist in India, and also how it's seeping into the very fabric of the Indian society, and the kind of problems that this, of course, brings forth to the Muslim population. There's so many different ways that we've seen Muslims being targeted in the past, whether it's bulldozer politics or the hijab ban or other ways that we've seen the mob violence come forward. Now we also see that perhaps different ways to spread hate are now being developed, including using different art forms such as film and media and music, that is now incorporating such language that outrightly speaks about the Muslim population, othering them, talking about them going back to Pakistan, and blaming the fact that it is the Muslims that are causing trouble within India. And all of this now points towards the way that this is going to grip the society at large and have an impact on the way that people in India, especially the younger lot, thinks. How do you see this particular development with regards to using such art forms to spread hate, and whether or not this also needs to stop and be considered as part of hate speech, and the consequences with regards to hate speech be taken?
Alarmed, then you can be in Pakistan. Because what is happening now, and the way the art forms, literature, journalism itself, political processes have been suborned to this single object of dividing India on communal lines. I'm more alarmed because I am part of the group that is targeted. It is not just Islam. What happens to Islam today will happen to Christians within a few hours of that, and to Sikhs and to Dalits. So I take it in its totality, and I'm really alarmed because never we have seen over the years graded incremental heightening of passions, but this is an exponential curve which is reaching its peak very shortly, long before the 2024 elections come due, in which this will be an important instrument for Mr. Modi's march to his third term, which is already announced. So we know the objective, but the process we had never in our dreams or nightmares imagined would be so rapid and so fast. This is alarming because this
Right.
could easily. No, can I just
r-
conclude? Can I just
right.
conclude, please? Because
Please go ahead, sir.
this can easily take events out of the hands of those who are trying to mastermind it.
Right. Dr. Dayal, while listening to you, I was thinking that an incorrigible optimist like you, sir, must be really suffocated at this moment. My question is regarding the intensity of what we are witnessing right now. Is it that they have intensified, these activities have intensified over the past few weeks or months? Or is it that these elements have been around and doing exactly that, and now it is being magnified by the media?
Uh, Both yes and no. The fact that Islamophobia has been incrementally increased from 2013, when the campaign to make Modi the prime minister started, that has been taking its own growth, its own rise. It has been heightening, and you can measure the rate at which it has been happening, depending on whether there were state elections, whether there were parliamentary elections, or whatever, whether there was tension with Pakistan. But that was a measurable thing, and we wondered that it must be quite in control of the people masterminding it. But what I was trying to say was this particular thing, because simultaneously the bulldozers are active, the laws are being modified, the music, street theater has been heightened, hate speeches have been heightened. We have just seen, we are not to the end of the religious parliaments. So all of them taken together in a very short
Exactly.
time with such intensity was not seen by us.
Exactly.
Right.
Kapil, as we already know that you are quite active on social media. Plus, you eye upon geopolitics as well, especially the regional politics. You do follow that. Point here is that it is not only against the Muslims. It is the ideology is against the Sikhs, against the Christians, and then it is against the Dalits as well and secular Hindus. I am sure and I know about this that anyone who goes to shrines like Ajmer Sharif or Haji Darbar, anyone who goes there being Hindu, I mean they are targeted in India. So don't you think that it is all about one single ideology, which is far right ideology within Hinduism, and Hindu as a religion, it has nothing to do with it. But of course, this political or far right or extremist Hindu ideology, Hindutva ideology, is the basis of the problem. And sadly, we are seeing that today's regime, Modi regime, and BJP, it is backed by that RSS ideology.
Yeah, thank you. I think I recently saw one of the report by the Al Jazeera, and the way these songs are being made and the way they are propagating hatred against one particular community, a Muslims minority in India. I think that was really shocking. It's not only that a Muslim minority they are suffering; it's about the Christian minority there in India, the Sikhs and other Dalits. They are also suffering because they are propagating one particular ideology, as you mentioned. But what I always say, and I often write on this thing, and I say that India should be now officially declared as the Hindu Republic of India. It is no more a secular state. It is no more a secular country, because the way we are seeing, it's unfortunate. It's quite unfortunate to see that whatever happens there, and they are asking millions of Muslims go to Pakistan. I mean, to what? On one side, they are against the division of the subcontinent, and other side, they are accepting the division, and they are, you say, asking their fellow countrymen who have lived there since the centuries in India, and they're asking them to leave their homeland and go to Pakistan. It is the same case. Like we are sometime Kapil is asking Pakistan, okay, go back to India, as if I do not belong to this land. Whereas my
Hmm.
forefathers in 1947 they preferred this part of the land and they didn't move to India. So this is really
Hmm.
unfortunate to see that the
Absolutely.
minorities on, yeah.
Absolutely, and Mr. Kapil, I'm glad you mentioned the story by Al Jazeera, because there's also a lot of interviews or with regards to the singers who have developed such music and such lyrics. And the fact that bothers me especially is the way that they're defending it, and they absolutely believe that whatever they're saying is correct, whatever they're talking about is accurate, and what they believe is the right thing. And that points us to the larger problem that when we talk about the Hindutva ideology, or this sense that they're better or supreme than the rest of the population or people from other religions and faith, is something that now is deeply rooted or ingrained in a large population within India. How do we even begin to tackle that?
Yeah, I think one more thing here I want to mention here, that see in India what happens, that they are actually talking about the hatred against their own country fellows, whereas in Pakistan if such incidents happen, they are actually giving they actually talk about the Hindus with reference to India. They're not talking about the hatred against the Pakistani Hindus. So here's some sort of, they actually mix up the things here. One thing. A second thing, I have never ever heard that Indian parliament or Indian, say, this government official, they have ever removed any government official or any they have removed any minister from their minister portfolio for saying any derogatory words against Muslims in India. But whereas we see in Pakistan in 2019, one of the Pakistan's biggest province, Punjab's information minister Faisal Hassan Chauhan, he was removed for making
Exactly.
derogatory remarks against Hindu community in Pakistan. But these things don't happen in India. That they're sitting prime minister, they're sitting chief minister of UP, this Yogi. So
Yogi
they are
Adityanath.
openly spewing hatred, spewing venom of the
Hmm.
hatred against Muslim.
They're giving
But
awards.
no, not sorry.
No.
Right,
Look,
right. Couple, as you have pointed out, even if you
look,
talk about Pakistan, situation might be far from perfect.
Hmm.
No doubt about that. But the fact is that nobody calls Pakistan the secular miracle that India is called, right? The secular wonder. And unfortunately, this is happening right now in India. And let me, with your permission, Kapil, go to Dr. Dayal. Dr. Dayal, we are looking at the state of affairs in India, and you have rightly pointed out that other communities have also been ostracized, they have been marginalized, and they are being attacked. Christians, there are dog whistles being used against Christians, and then regarding reservations, they are attacking, a significant part of the society, that is Dalits. Why is it that Indian community abroad, expatriates who are very conscientious, who have actually benefited from the Western liberal democracy, why are they not taking note of what is going on in India? I understand that Islamophobia might be a global issue, but when you talk about Christians, when you talk about Dalits, when you talk about Sikhs, other communities, why is it that those expatriates are not taking note or raising their voice?
see, in the US particularly, which leads and finances much of this, there are two groups. One is called the Hindu American Foundation or Fellowship or whatever it is, which is made up of Islamophobes and Christophobes who are bhaktas, followers of Mr. Modi and the BJP and the RSS for long before Mr. Modi came, because the RSS and the BJP have a front in Washington, D.C., now officially recognized as a political front. They have been very, very active. They've been active in every single capital of the states. They have been pushing people, they've been financing the campaigns of Indians and even some white people, like that girl from Hawaii. They've been financing their campaigns and getting them elected. They like to use it. But fortunately, apart from the American Islamic Indian Association, IAMC, apart from that, there's a new group. It is called Hindus for Human Rights. Its work in the last 2 months has been remarkable. They've just brought out a 90-odd page document which lists absolutely with clarity the financing of these organizations, which lists how they manipulate and do their advocacy in Washington, D.C. and the states, and so on and so forth. And it also gives, for the first time, I think, the independent RSS institutions that have come up and are flowering in the US. Now, that sort of a work shows the amount of investment that has gone from the BJP and the RSS, nationally and internationally, in forwarding their agenda, the political rise based on elimination of all minorities in India.
Exactly. Dr. Dayal, there is a question that relates to you and me equally, and that is, if we look at the historic perspective, of course, Hindutva ideology claims and their followers, they do accept it, that they keep on chanting that all of the Muslims go back to either Turkey or go back to Middle East, because this is where you belong, or more closer is Pakistan and go back there. And if we talk about Christians, they keep on telling them, oh, go to Portuguese or go to British or go somewhere else. But here is me and you, both of us, of course we can trace ourselves with this land. I mean, my name suggests that I belong to this land, and only 400 years ago, if there was a conversion that took place, it took place. And that's it. I mean, things are moving on. And why are we seeing that in today's India, it is 21st century, still people are buying this idea of, or if there is someone Muslim, he should go back to where Islam is. Why? Why can't they understand that the conversions did take place from the Hinduism, and now, of course, you can't tell them that this land does not belong to you just because you're not Hindu.
No, hang on. For you, the converts, they have another formula. They call it Ghar Wapsi.
Ghar Wapsi.
Right.
I would like to contest your definition of conversions. Because the tribals, for instance, who became Christians were not Hindus. They had their own faith. And that is another thing, because they are now being forcibly converted to Hinduism. They were never Hindus. The Nagas were never Hindus. The Maithis were never Hindus. The Northeast was not a Hindu area. And so it is not true to say that every Indian Muslim and Christian and Sikh is a convert from Hinduism. We are not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mr. Kapil, there's also the aspect.
Christianity
Yes, Dr. Dayal.
So every Christian in the world is a convert, of course, but not from Hinduism.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Mr. Kapil, there's also the aspect, of course, of how history is being understood by the people in India, especially the younger generation as well. And perhaps when we were all very, very young, we hardly questioned what was being taught to us in terms of our history books or what really had happened in the past. And sure, there is that individual responsibility to be able to question and analyze things. But when we look at the kind of the way that these things are being taught or being spoken about, or are part of the mainstream culture or the media or music that people or children will grow up with, listening to or understanding the sentiment that is currently existing within India, don't you think that this also is a problem in terms of how they're going to be able to perceive the events of the past, and then of course be able to form an opinion about these communities and these religions as well? We've also seen in films, also seen in songs, that perhaps even emperors of the past, Mughal emperors, have been portrayed in a completely different light, which also points towards a problem that may continue on for long.
And Kapil, because we were repeatedly, while discussing India, word Hindu keeps on coming up, one has to actually draw this distinction that the current ruling elite of India is not Hindu, they are Hindutva driven, which is a different kind of worldview than Hinduism, which might have something to do with some very different kind of ideology. Please go ahead.
As Islam has nothing to do with extremism, same is the case with Hinduism. Hindus have nothing to do with the extremist Hindu thought, which is Hindutva.
Yeah, Hindutva has hardly anything to do with the great religion Hinduism.
But is that even understood now by the people in India?
Yeah.
Kapil, go ahead.
Now coming back to the question. So I think art is, of course, one of the strongest form, to propagate your ideology, to propagate use your narrative, to form the narrative. And I think India is very good at it, and India has got a huge market of the showbiz industry, the Bollywood, and this music and art, everything there. So I think when these songs are being made and the way this hate is being propagated through art, through the form of art, is very dangerous. And I think the way it is will be formulating the young minds and the raw minds, and the way it will be changing their narratives, changing their opinions, or changing their worldview about those persecuted and marginalized communities in India will be horrific in the days to come. This will be really horrific. I think like in Pakistan, I think there are the laws which are to curb hate speech in Pakistan. I hope there are the laws in India too. But I don't know whether these laws are being implemented or not, and how these laws are being implemented or not. I think Dr.
Right.
Johnny Dal can
Yes,
further
Dr. John, you
clarify
want to
whether
add
these
something?
laws are being
No, I wanted to add three things to what he has said. A tremendous amount of energy, thought, and money is being invested in generating this hate. You can't make all these things in a jiffy. You require technology, technique. People need to earn to be able to spend their time on it. That is one of the issues, that somebody with the government permission or the government itself is financing all this activity. So that is the first thing. The second was in reply to Mr. Kapil Dev, who has correctly pointed out, we have the same laws as Pakistan, derived from the same British laws to curb hate speech. But that law is used to curb the speech of the human rights defenders, to curb my speech, not to curb the hate monger speech. Here we have ministers who openly say, Goli Maro, so and so ko. I can't say it on TV, but they say it. We have other ministers who are known to have said, we'll dig out the corpses and rape them. If all of those things, and these people continue to be in office, they continue to hold some of the highest office. And that is my main point. We are alarmed that our citizenship is being defined by a religion, not by the fact that I and my ancestors have been in this land for as long as anybody else's ancestors. The basis of my constitutional citizenship is being challenged, and that is the most frightening.
Absolutely. And Dr. John Dayal, earlier, what? Yes, Mr.
I
Kapil.
just want to say, I think after listening to Dr. I just want to say that perhaps I feel sometimes humanity is the biggest minority on both sides of the border.
Very true.
Absolutely true.
Absolutely.
Golden words.
Golden words.
Dr. John, earlier, of course, we were talking about the way that the media is going to have an impact or an influence, and what Mr. Kapil was speaking about earlier, of course. And perhaps all of us are at some point or the other, and to some extent or the other, guilty of worshipping heroes or whoever that we admire. And it has a huge influence on people as well. But then when we look at the way that we need to be able to sort of counteract this influence, we'll also have to use the same sort of mechanisms or techniques or people whose voices actually matter, whose voices actually carry the kind of influence on public opinion. Is that something that is happening or can happen within India?
And Dr. Saab, with due respect, regarding this perversion of history through Bollywood and other means. When you look at the way they have actually exploited the victimhood of Indian popular culture or their identity, do you think that the foundation was laid by the previous governments when they actually adopted curriculum which actually presented India as a victim?
I think we are all to blame. We are all to blame in not teaching historiography to our children, not teaching them research, not teaching them to read collateral material, to make a difference between mythology and history, to make a difference between ideology and religion, to make a difference between ethics, philosophy, theology, and practical politics. We have allowed them to mix, but Mr. Modi and the RSS have carried it to an extreme until Bihari Bajpayee and L.K. Advani were no less. Babri Masjid was demolished then. The Gujarat riots in 67 and 2002 took place then. So they were no less. But as I said earlier, you could gauge the rise of communalism and Hindutva. Now, the rise is exponential. It is no longer the normal Maxwellian curve. It is exponential. And therefore, either there has to be a denouement, either it has to end suddenly in a defeat in the elections or something, or it may take a very violent form. We don't know. I am hoping that this WhatsApp university will fail, that reason will triumph, that people like us, civil society, Hindus, the good Hindus, will triumph, international opinion will triumph, and Hindutva will die its natural death.
Exactly. Kapil, looking at the political situation of BJP and India, today's India, of course, it is apparent that the future leadership might go in the hands of Yogi Adityanath, and Yogi Adityanath is someone who is known for speaking hateful remarks against Muslims in public. We know that Modi was no different, and of course, in Gujarat riots, he was the one who was CM at that time. But looking at the picture overall, the political picture, how do you see things shaping up in coming future? Will we be seeing the hate increasing in India in the coming times, especially Yogi Adityanath times?
And before we go there, with your permission, Sana, Madam Speaker, am I allowed to actually draw a distinction? You know, this actually comparison between Modi and Yogi is a little bit strange to me, because when Modi went to the camps after Gujarat riots, he actually called those camps procreation factories, right?
Exactly.
Factories to make babies. But that was a different level of cruelty. Yogi Adityanath says that Muslim women and their dead bodies should be raped.
Exactly, taken out of the
This
graves
is,
and raped.
yeah, this is a new level of cruelty.
Yeah.
So when that is happening, I don't think we can compare the two. It is a very weak nuance, but it is a nuance.
Kapil,
It is.
Kapil, your say on it.
Yeah, I think the level of hatred, I think the intensity of the hatred that is going to be increased in the coming days. The reason being because I think they are actually preparing for the next elections. What I often compare that in Pakistan, when election season is going on and when the election fever is up, we never see that there is anti-India campaign or the anti-Hindu campaigning going on in Pakistan, because during this election process, the narrative among the public is often formed on the development or the issues of the corruption. That narrative is never ever built upon the anti-India sentiments or anti-Hindu sentiments in Pakistan. Whereas in India, it's quite opposite. In India, the election campaigns, the election narrative is completely built upon anti-Pakistan narrative or anti-Muslim narrative. This is how the Modi and Yogis, they are actually taking advantage of this whole narrative. This is how they are actually pouring in huge money in making these videos, in making these songs through the art and through the various forms of, you can say, arts.
Very true.
All right. Dr. John Dayal, I believe you wanted to add something.
No, I really wanted to add, there is no comparison between Mr. Advani, Mr. Modi, and Yogi or whoever else may be the successor, as and when Mr. Modi chooses to retire. We don't know. He doesn't know. How can one man know who his successor will be. But the point really is they are the same.
Exactly.
They are identical in their hatred, and they can only demonize Muslims by bringing in Pakistan. That is the one thing that Christians are saved to an extent, although they immediately ally us with the Pope or with Rome or with Italy or with whatever. But
That's true.
point is, I cannot, as an Indian, I will not grade Advani, Modi, Yogi, and say one is better than the other. They are
All
No,
identical.
no, the point was not that one is better. The point was one is far worse.
was.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and there is a kind of an element of decline. But going back to what Kapil was saying earlier, Sana, it reminded me of President Obama's memoir, where he says that India is a strange country, where all of a sudden, a country with so many diversity and nuances suddenly becomes one and flattens when it comes to Pakistan.
Flattens, absolutely. Thank you very much, Dr. John Dayal, for joining us,
Thank
and
you
Mr.
very much.
Kapil Dev for being a part of the show and sharing your views regarding India and what is going on
Thank you.
with the Muslim population and other minorities within India as well. And we can only hope for change and for better days to come. In our second segment of the show, we'll be taking a look at the political situation in Pakistan and also take a closer look at PTI's leadership and the statements that have been coming in from Imran Khan talking about Pakistan being divided if the right decisions are not made. He's also made references to the establishment, the armed institutions in the past, and has continued to do so despite the fact that there have been denials and warnings from the ISPR and other institutions as well to not involve them in political matters and that they are away from the political decision making of the country. However, we have seen that irresponsible statements are still coming in from Imran Khan and the PTI leadership. We've been joined by Dr. Niaz Murtaza, who's a political analyst, for more on this segment. Thank you very much, Dr. Niaz, for being part of the show today. And we've seen in the past now that there have been a lot of irresponsible statements coming in from the PTI, especially since the ouster of the former Prime Minister. And repeatedly, they've been involving different institutions within the political matters of the country. They've called out on the neutrality of these institutions as well, and now they've also talked about the consequences that will exist if the right decisions are not made. Could you also help us understand what exactly is it that Imran Khan is referring to as the right decisions? Is it only the fact that they are demanding the elections or the so-called imported government to be removed, or is it that they just want their own power back?
There's been a lot of criticism of institutions over the years by different parties, and I think a lot of it is also well deserved. But what is different about the criticism by Imran Khan right now is that, the other politicians used to ask institutions to keep away from politics and become neutral. Now, what Imran Khan is doing is he's asking them to stop being neutral and actually support him, which makes it, an extremely strange demand coming from him. And then, you should also keep in mind that his charges, he's saying that, he was removed through a conspiracy by, perhaps the institutions as well as, the US. There is nothing to, support that kind of, charges. If you look at all the credible sources, etc., newspapers, human rights institutions, and so on. I don't think anybody is supporting his charges. It's just him and other PTI people. Whereas in the past, of course, you had credible institutions like the European Union criticizing institutions for, getting involved in elections and trying to influence them. So I think what's happening now is that, he's becoming more and more desperate as he realizes, he came, tried to do a long march, and he realized, that the numbers that he was able to generate were much, much smaller than what he was hoping for. He was talking about 2 million people coming in, and I don't think he even got 20 to 30,000 rupees. I haven't seen a good, credible estimate, but I doubt it if it would be more than that. So I
Okay.
think what he's doing is that he's becoming more and more desperate and try to hurl any allegation that he can think of. without thinking of the impact that this will have on Pakistan's security, because he's basically trying to whip up emotions against the top leadership, security leadership within our security institutions, and then within the general public.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely. And
given the
Dr. Niaz,
fact
I
that
understand that Imran Khan may be becoming more and more desperate, but what I also want to understand is whether or not he's becoming more and more problematic and unacceptable, and how long before we actually come to this conclusion where we don't see him or the PTI's leadership fit for politics, or the political party actually representing something which is creating big trouble for the political scenario of the country. Are we there yet?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. You can't, really predict what a PTI will do from being, a national mainstream party. It's just becoming more and more an extremist party. So, the way it broke the constitution and trying to, end the vote of no confidence, then the violence that it created in Punjab Assembly, then the violence that it created in Islamabad as part of its long march. You don't know what's going to come next. And the fact of the matter is that the PTI is ruling three very very sensitive regions now. It's in power in KP, it's in power in AJK, and it's in power in GB. All of them are contiguous, and all of them are also contiguous to very sensitive areas, like KP because of its contiguity to Afghanistan, GB because of its proximity to China, and then AJK, of course, due to the Indian divide. And then there is the fact that the TTP is making a comeback. It's become more and more active in attacking Pakistan from Afghanistan ever since the Afghan Taliban took over. And of course, we all know that Imran Khan has a great degree of admiration for the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, and he even went to the extent of saying that they should be allowed to open an office in Peshawar. So with him ruling in Peshawar, you don't know to what extent he's going to go. So obviously, this could, really become a security threat in the future. I don't think it's there, and I wouldn't support any sort of, heavy-handed measures. What we saw with the government overreacting, and all the shelling, and the baton charging, etc. I think that was also overdone. I think what we need to go back is what the Supreme Court has laid down, that they should do their protests in a small ground somewhere in Islamabad, and the government should give them permission for that. And of course, the government would have the right to secure the rest of Islamabad, to make sure that they don't move from that ground which is assigned to them, and try to create a problems in the rest of Islamabad. If they have to take police action, then that would be
Right.
understandable.
Right, Dr. Saab, you used a word that Sana also echoed, desperation. Now, the question I just want to understand, why do you think they would be desperate at this time? So far, what we have seen, that they have been setting the agenda. Even at this moment, today's news is dominated by Imran Khan's statements, right? When he was in power, he managed to actually come up with that conspiracy narrative. And we still don't have a measure to gauge whether people, the voter, will not vote for the party. So, what would actually indicate that they are getting desperate at this time?
Well, I think part of the reason is the loss of support from institutions for 3.5 years. They were literally hand walked, and supported in every way. So that was the biggest reason for getting desperate, losing that support that was instrumental in bringing them to power in 2018. And then there is obviously the fact that their performance wasn't very good. And if you look at by elections, some of the opinion polls, of course none of them are very hard, and you can't say 100% accurate. But if you put all that together, and then the small numbers that showed up even from KP in the long march, you get a sense that the party is not doing well in Pindi nor in the rest of Pakistan. So I think that is what is creating the desperation. And from what I hear, there is also rumblings within the party against some of the decisions that he's taken. So I think that is all coming together to create this kind of desperation.
Yeah, Dr. Niaz, if we talk about the precedent which is being set, don't you think that it is a precedent which is being followed right now to malign the institutions? And they have figured out that whenever they malign the institutions, that is the only way to get the things done in Pakistan, which is a very bad omen for Pakistan's democracy. Of course, it would not be helpful towards Pakistan's democracy. Such kind of slogans or such kind of statements. I mean, there should always be a red line that should never be crossed by any of the Democratic Party in Pakistan. But sadly, all of them, they have been doing it, and you have mentioned it earlier. Just wanted to know, should there be a law that defines once for all that whoever uses these kind of tactics, whichever the political party it is, it should be suspended?
And
Well,
by
I
the
would,
way, sorry, Dr. Saab, let me add to this
I mean,
question. Dr.
yeah.
Saab, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Dr. Saab, I just wanted you to actually comment also on, you earlier said that you yourself have been a critic in the past. Do you think that what was said yesterday in the interview, is it tantamount to maligning the institutions?
Well, I am a fierce critic of, institutions' involvement in politics, and, a lot of criticism that has taken place against them was well justified. But the fact of the point is that in this particular case, I don't think it's justified the criticism that Imran Khan is doing, because from what I can see, and of course, I don't have 100% accurate information, but from whatever I can gather from different sources, all that happened was that institutions became neutral as they should be. I don't think they went to the other side to try to help the opposition in any way to help the vote of no confidence succeed. So to that extent, I think the criticism of the institutions is wrong. But then I wouldn't support a law which bans any criticisms of the institutions. There's already some laws in place, and I oppose them, but I just oppose, the kind of rhetoric and the narrative that Imran Khan is creating, because it is false in this case.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you very
Niaz
much, sir.
Mirza, for being a part of the show and talking to us and sharing your views on what is going on in the country. And we can only hope that whatever it is that the political parties are saying or doing, they are doing so because they're motivated by the benefit that they want to bring to the people of Pakistan. And we hope that this, of course, brings in a positive change for the people of the country. That's all from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.